Once upon a time, three very different dogs crossed the frozen land bridge.
The largest stayed in the frozen north, living alongside people in one of the harshest climates on Earth. The smallest crossed vast and varied land, eventually settling with people in the dry, red heat of the Southwest. And the red, middle-sized dog took a different path, ending up on the opposite coast, living amongst its own kind.
This is America 250, The Dogs. Welcome to Episode 1. This is the Salkehatchie. Blackwater. Cypress. Silence.
In the 1970s, a biologist named Dr. Brisbin was working near the Savannah River site when he noticed something moving in the shadows of places just like this. Not a deer, not a coyote, a dog.
But it didn't look like any dog he'd ever seen before. It was red, colored like clay, with a tail like a fishhook and ears that never stopped moving.
In the 1970s, Dr. Brisbin began to observe these dogs in their natural habitat. He studied their pack movements, their unique hunting behaviors, and how they thrived in the isolation of the blackwater swamps. He realized he wasn't looking at a group of abandoned pets. He was looking at a primitive biology that had been largely lost to the modern world. But Dr. Brisbin wasn't the first to notice them. The people who had lived on this land for thousands of years knew them well.
Look at this carving by Cherokee master artists going back Chiltosky. Look at the ears, the posture, the color. This isn't just an artist's imagination, it's a portrait. It's a record of a partner that has walked beside the people of the Southeast since the very beginning.
It would take nearly 20 years for genetic science to catch up to his field studies. But when researchers finally sequenced their DNA in the 1990s, the mystery was solved. These dogs, red-colored like clay, didn't share the genetic markers of European breeds. Instead, their lineage pointed back across the Bering Strait to the ancient dogs of Asia.
They weren't just survivors. They were a biological map of the first human migration into the Americas. They are the Carolina dogs, the American dingo.
They don't live like our pets. They live in packs with a hierarchy as strict as any military unit. They dig snout holes in the riverbanks to find food, a behavior that isn't taught. It's hard-coded in their genes from a time before the first European ship ever sighted these shores.
So what are snout holes? They are perfectly conical, tapering down to a point. They are usually just deep enough for the dog's long, wedge-shaped snout to fit inside. The dog doesn't use its paws. It pushes its nose directly into the soft mud or sand of riverbanks and fields, often twisting its head to drill the hole. Interestingly, this behavior is most common in females and typically peaks between September and January.
So why do they do it? Scientists and observers, like Dr. Brisbin, have several theories, though none are 100% proven. Some think they're mining for minerals. Some believe the dogs are seeking specific nutrients or minerals, like calcium or salt, found in certain layers of the soil, especially during pregnancy. Some think they're hunting subterranean prey. They may be seeking out small grubs, insects, or earthworms that other dogs simply ignore. Or it could be a hormonal ritual, because it is so closely tied to the winter months and female cycles. It may be a vestigial nesting or marking instinct from their ancestors. To understand how a dog like this ended up in a South Carolina swamp, we have to follow the trail back.
Not to Europe, but to the north, to a world of ice, where the relationship between man and dog was forged in a freezer.
If the Carolina dog is a ghost in the trees, its northern cousins were the iron and steel of the American Arctic. To understand these dogs, you have to look at the map.
Between the edge of Siberia and the coast of Alaska lies the Bering Strait, a narrow 55-mile gateway of water that for thousands of years froze into a solid bridge of ice. 1,000 years ago, a group of master mariners and hunters known as the Inupiat, the ancestors of the Alaskan Inuit, crossed that ice. They didn't come empty-handed. They brought a technology that changed the history of the American continent, the dog sled.
Forget the husky on the end of a suburban leash. The dogs the Inupiat brought into what is now Alaska were not pets.
They were the Alaskan Malamute prototype, the freight train of the North. They were thick-boned, broad-chested, and possessed a double coat so dense that moisture couldn't reach their skin.
In a world with no wood for wheels and no grass for horses, the dog was the only way to move across the Alaskan tundra.
They pulled sleds made of bone and frozen hide. They didn't just carry gear, they carried the tribe. They could scent a seal's breathing hole through 3 feet of ice. They were the only thing standing between a sleeping family and a 1,500-pound polar bear.
Life in the Arctic was measured in calories and BTUs. At night, the dogs weren't let inside. The people lived with them. A 1-dog night was chilly.
A 3-dog night was an Alaskan blizzard so cold that you needed the body heat of 3 dogs pressed against you just to wake up the next morning.
We know this isn't folklore because the American permafrost holds the truth.
Archaeologists in Alaska have found ivory toggles and leather harness fragments dating back centuries. This is what that survival looked like. Indigenous sled dogs huddled deep in hen-dug snow pits, their collective breath freezing into ghost-white clouds against the Arctic night.
This wasn't just a pack. It was a biological life support system. But as we move south, away from the ice and toward the sun-baked canyons of the Southwest, the relationship changes. The dog stops being an engine and starts being a spirit. As the trail leads south, the climate changes, and so does the dog.
In the canyons of the ancestral Puebloans and across the sun-baked landscapes of the Southwest, the dog was no longer a beast of burden. It became something more, a guardian of the spirit. Likenesses like this one from Colima, Mexico, provide a window into the ancient American canine. While licensed images of vessels found in the American Southwest are rare, the archaeological record confirms a shared obsession across the border.
From the Gila River to the Sonora, we find these effigy pots, vessels crafted between 1000 and 1150 AD that mirrored the dogs of the desert. They were smaller than their northern cousins, with short coats to handle the heat, prick ears, and a watchful gaze. They weren't just decorations. They were mirrors of a partner that carried the weight of a continent. In the Southwest, dogs were the alarm system of the mesa. They lived in the plazas, protected the grain stores from rodents, and warned of approaching strangers. But they also lived in the in-between. This is where the modern story gets complicated. For many indigenous cultures, the dog was the only animal that belonged both to the human world and the spirit world. Because of that, they were pathfinders.
Likenesses like this one, found in Veracruz, Mexico, show how a continental belief was etched in the clay. We see it in the American Southwest as well. When a person died, a dog was often buried with them.
To the modern eye, this looks like sacrifice. To the ancient eye, it was an act of profound necessity. The dog was the only one who knew the way to the afterlife. They were sent ahead to guide their human partners home.
We see the evidence in the bones, intentional burials, sometimes with grave goods, alongside marks that show that they were also used for food in times of ritual or extreme scarcity.
In the West, we struggle with the idea of eating a dog. But in the ancient Americas, this wasn't about livestock. It was about survival and respect. To consume the dog was to absorb its loyalty, its strength, and its protection. It was a closed loop of life and death. Does this dog still exist? Not in the way the Carolina dog does. When the Spanish arrived with their war dogs and the British with their hounds, these ancient desert lineages were nearly wiped out by disease and crossbreeding.
But if you look at a Chihuahua or a Squintly, you are looking at the genetic ghosts of these pottery dogs. You were looking at a survivor of a 10,000-year-old desert tradition.
3 landscapes, 3 dogs, 1 shared history. From the frozen silence of the Arctic to the red clay of the Southwest, and finally back to the shifting shadows of the Carolina swamps. The dog has been the constant. We often think of America as the New World, but for the dog, this world is ancient. They were here 10,000 years before the first horse stepped off a Spanish ship. They were here before the borders, before the states, and before the songs. They weren't just animals we found here. They were the partners that made human life in this hemisphere possible. So, the next time you look into the woods along the Little Salkehatchie or see a ginger-colored mutt on the side of a country road, look closer. You aren't just looking at a stray. You are looking at a living fossil, a survivor that has outlasted empires and ice ages, a dog that chose to stay wild so that its story, the original American story, would never be forgotten. America 250, The Dogs, isn't just about the last 2.5 centuries of people. It's about the 15 millennia of the bond. Because before we were a nation, we were a pack.